Hey there, Josh Burns, and I'm doing my final media clip project on special education. And in my PowerPoint that I put together today, I'm going to hit on, a few of the special things about special education. Some of the exceptionalities, the social skills. We'll hit on some behavioral characteristics. Also, there's emotional and behavioral disorders, developmental disabilities, speech and language disorders, and the autism spectrum disorders, and also some orthopedic impairments and neurological disorders. And to start off on some of the exceptionalities, as I listed here, students who gave exceptionalities can be learning disabilities, special gifts, or talents. These students are significantly different than other peers in one way or another. So basically what it's talking about is, not all students are going to learn the same. One student is going to learn some material a little different than the other, and there's certain disabilities when it comes to learning that people have that just, I guess, it just classifies them, as kind of a special, they need a special need. Their special gifts or talents, people that they have certain talents and certain gifts that they can do that other people that they just can't. If the exceptionality interferes with what is considered normal, then the student is assessed and determined to have exceptionalities. Even though putting labels on people is often frowned upon, the state requires that students are identified as exceptional in order to receive the special education they need. And I agree with that also. You don't really want to put a label on any student because it is frowned upon, but it also kind of, it gives the student, they feel as if they're different from all of the other students, and that's what you don't want. Just because someone has a special education need or are classified in a special education class, or any of the characteristics, that they shouldn't have a label on them. Everyone should be treated the same and fairly. Some of the social skills. Individuals who have a learning disability may be less observant of their social environment. So, someone who has a learning disability, it may be a little harder for them to pay attention. And then that may come off as if the person, this may come off as if the person is immature, bossy, or not being able to read cues. They may become too eager to be accepted, which can cause them to try too hard. And just because that they're having trouble being as observant in a social environment as someone else, it's going to be hard for them to pay attention. And just as you refer to some of the behavioral stuff, they may seem immature and bossy, but it's at the same time it's hard for them to be able to read cues and follow along on everyone else's level. Students who have learning disabilities are not only challenged when it comes to schools, but socialization also. I mean, just in an everyday world, it's not as easy for someone to carry on a simple conversation. They may have trouble thinking of what they're going to say next, or just communicating in general. Some of their behavioral characteristics include poor impulse control, immature, bossy, low frustration tolerance, and that can be easily seen there, because when someone is not getting something or learning, or as easy as going back to social skills, having just ease to hold a simple conversation with someone, it can be very frustrating, just because you look around you and everyone else is just living a normal everyday day-to-day life, and it's not as easy for some people. Inability to interpret social cues, illogical reasons for action, and trying too hard to fit in. Everybody wants to fit in. Nobody wants to stand out or be different. Everyone wants to be liked and accepted. Uh, some of the illogical reasons for actions, kind of goes back to the low frustration tolerance. They may get mad and have a illogical action just because they're so frustrated about something. Emotional and behavioral disorders. These disorders include anxiety disorders, eating disorders, ADHD, and bipolar disorder. Someone who is not happy or easily frustrated or just not doing well or feeling accepted, they can have bad anxiety along with the eating disorder, which then in turn, you know, they gain weight, and then they feel even more different. ADHD, where they're having, just simple trouble just to pay attention and follow rules. Schools use many tools to determine if a student fits into one of these categories. They use social work analysis, classroom observations, interviews, and IQ tests. There's a lot of different ways that students can be observed to see whether they have one of these disorders, whether it be anxiety or ADHD or bipolar. Teachers can use instructional strategies that include, which I think these are great, help the students become aware of their behaviors and help them with copying skills. You can also, if a student is acting out or just behaving worse than they should be, then a teacher can bring that to their attention and try to, maybe give them an example as, John Doe over here, he's paying great attention. His behavior is on, you can kind of just give them an example to follow where it may be a little easier for them to understand. Journal entries to help them express their thoughts they otherwise may not share, because someone might not want to talk about it, but they could also write it down and express it on paper, and it kind of gives the teacher an idea of what they're feeling. Intellectual and developmental disabilities, previously known as retardation, is a defectiveness in adaptive behavioral during the developmental period that affects a educational performance, usually determined by IQ tests and adaptive behavioral tests. Teachers can emphasize strengths and create more opportunities for success, help the students engage in clubs and group activities to practice social skills, and provide immediate feedback. So as the student, as you can engage them in different clubs and, group activities with all the other students so they don't feel excluded from anything, and, help them practice their social skills. And as they do that, you can provide feedback to them and just tell them, how great of a job they're doing, or, simple things that they can improve. Speech and language disorders. Teachers, they can use differentiated instruction, such as use of nonverbal cues to accompany classroom routines for students who have difficulty with speech. Recast the students' language back to them to practice pronunciation. So if they're, pronouncing a simple word wrong, you can help them pronounce it right and repeat it back to them. And, take your time, repeat directions often, kind of help them get it into their head. Allow students to draw, build, or write for answers that would otherwise be answered verbally. Kind of goes back to the writing, their feelings down that they're not going to tell anybody. if they can't tell you the answer, it may be just them having a simple social problem, and you can give them other options as to draw it. They can build it on something, or just write it down. Communication disorders such as stuttering, voice impairment, and impaired articulation. Um, I'd say the stuttering, I do that myself. That's just something someone may do that when they get nervous, or it just may be a problem that they have acquired. Voice impairment and impaired articulation. Autism spectrum disorders, verbal and nonverbal communication and social interacting is affected from a developmental disability and is usually discovered by age 3. People with autism tend to re- repeatedly do things and resistant to change in day-to-day activities or environments. They just don't like, I would say, change. I know several people who have autism, and they kind of get in a routine. They like the same thing day to day, just the little small simple things make them happy, and they don't really care for, to change that, or to throw something different, or you take them out of their environment. It just makes them uncomfortable, and it's not what they're used to and what they know. Teachers can use differentiated instruction, such as anchor activities that keep moving to a minimum, that also provide specific schedules. They like to follow a schedule, they like to know what they're doing, and that's just how they are. Excuse me. Cooperative learning allows students with ADHD to see how their peers act in social situations. Orthopedic impairments and neurological disorders. These impairments include muscular dystrophy, spina bifida, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, epilepsy, and traumatic brain injuries. There's numerous different things that can affect the orthopedic and neurological system. All these things that I mentioned, the muscular dystrophy, the spina bifida, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, and traumatic brain injuries, they take a big effect on anyone's day-to-day life. And it just has to be approached from a certain standpoint, because they may not be able to do all the certain things that any other student could do. Here, teachers can also use differentiated instruction, such as they can arrange the classroom to accommodate students with physical disabilities, whereas, say, a student is in a wheelchair. You may spread the tables or desks or chairs apart, allowing wider lanes and something like that, where it's easily for them to access anywhere in the classroom. You can set up a buddy system so the peer can take notes. That peer can write everything down to help the student who may have a impairment where they can't write. You can accommodate assignments accordingly, such as oral or written. Just as I said, for a student who couldn't write or do an assignment like any other student, you may give him a oral lesson where he can record himself rather than have to write it down, or herself. And in the end, I included a few of the links where I found some of my information. Thank you.